Hey guys, it's Dom and I'm here with a book discussion. Hey guys, today's discussion is going to be on Volume 2 of Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. Volume 2 is called... Already forgot. Volume 2 is called Cosette. We're going to discuss Volume 2, Cosette, today. Last time we talked about Volume 1. For this discussion, I'm hoping it's not summary heavy like Volume 1 was. That was not my intention for Volume 1. But it was my first discussion, so I did what I knew best. I kind of like the concept of comparing this to the musical, so I think that's what this is going to be about, and just obviously my personal opinions about the book and what I think, and let's do this. Also, sorry if you can't like really see my eyes in this video, like my hair is disgusting, so I'm going to wear a hat. And again, can't figure out the lighting in this living room. But I don't want to be in my bedroom just because this is spacious and actually clean. My bedroom is not clean. Got a big jug of water. That type of day. Alright, so Volume 2 opens up with something that's not in the musical, and it's just Victor Hugo ranting about the Battle of Waterloo for 40 pages. If I have to be completely honest, I didn't really read these chapters thoroughly because I learned about the Battle of Waterloo in high school, and just the way these chapters were written was kind of boring me to tears, so I used a literary summary online. I mean, I skimmed through the actual book as well, but if we're going to be honest here, I did thoroughly read the part where Thénardier saved Marius' dad, but according to a friend, it's more like saved. She was just like, let's just say he saves his dad just like he saved Marius in the exact same manner. I don't know what that means, so I'm not going to find out till later because I have a lot to go for this book. It's so hot in here. Something I did find interesting when he was talking about the Battle of Waterloo is he finally mentioned who the narrator is. The narrator is still he's a wayfarer, and he was reminiscing on the Battle of Waterloo. That's what those 40 pages were about. So part of me thinks like this guy was probably in that battle. I don't think they said, so I'm not for sure, but that's what I think. Also, it does explain why Thénardier wears the army jacket in the musical, because Thénardier was that person who wouldn't fight in the army. He would kind of just stand back, but then, you know, once everyone was dead and then the survivors were gone, he would like hunt bodies for goods, steal the goods, do some Thénardier kind of stuff. To be honest, he probably wears that uniform to feel better about himself. Seems like a very Thénardier thing to do. And then finally, book 2 comes along, and it still continues with stuff that's not in the musical, because Jean Valjean actually goes to jail for the second time, and he goes to jail for stealing money from Gervais, something, help me out here, because again, I don't speak French. And it was that crime he committed 8 years ago, and it's the crime that turned his life around. And he went from, lost my bookmark, he went from 24601 to 9430. And someone was falling off the ship, he saved them, but then he fell off the ship into the water and drowned, and then he was pronounced dead in the newspaper, and Javert was like, woo! He's dead, don't have to worry about him. So then we move on to stuff that is more so in the musical. Hugo talks about how this town, Montfermeil, maybe that's how it's pronounced, hardly any water. Everyone needs to go to the well in the forest to get their water, and Thénardiers are douchebags, so they make Cosette do all the housework, which includes getting the water, and she's absolutely horrified of this forest. So that's what those chapters talk about. So Cosette's hiding spot in the house when everyone's in the inn is like under a table where she sews socks for Eponine and Azelma, because even though they're the same age, they can't just do it themselves. And like Eponine's like kind of a bitch in this book, unlike the musical. I mean, at least 8-year-old Eponine is, but I also heard older Eponine is too. But like 8-year-old Eponine's kind of a bitch. Makes Cosette do like all her work, and like she won't let Cosette play with them, won't let Cosette touch her toys, and they just treat her like shit. And this man comes in and he's like, yo, my horse needs water. And because Cosette knows there's no water in the inn right now and she's horrified of going out to the forest at night, she's like, sir, yes he does. So she lied a lot, poor thing. And the guy's like, no, he doesn't. So they kept fighting, and finally Madame Thenardier's like, go. And, you know, they're singing that song where she's like, now look at there! The little matter of self! That's basically what that scene is. And that's all I have to say about that. Hugo also made it a point to talk about this doll that's in the store, but it's a very expensive doll in a store that's in a town of very poor people, so nobody can afford it, but everyone wants it. And Cosette wants it. So actually, before she goes to the forest, she looks at this doll, and you know, Madame Thenardier like yells at her and all that. But I'm actually glad we got to learn more about it, just because in the musical, I don't know about the stage musical, because again, I've never seen the stage musical. I've only listened to the soundtrack and saw like the concert versions. But in the movie, she glances at it before going in, but like we don't actually know what the significance is. So it is nice to know that, like, hey, nobody can afford this doll and everyone actually wants it. So nice to know that. In the forest, we actually get, or in the book, not in the forest. In the book, we actually get to see Cosette's fear of this forest, because I mean, maybe the musical or stage musical, but in the movie, you only see like 2 seconds of it, and it's just her going. It's like, okay, that does nothing. Like, where's the fear you were freaking out about before? But in this book, there's a whole chapter about it. Like, she's seeing shadows almost. I mean, it's like typical stuff when you're afraid of the dark. Like, she feels like this forest is surrounding her, and she's so afraid that she doesn't realize that the money Madame Thenardier gave her slipped out of her pocket. She was supposed to buy bread with that. And, she has the hardest time taking this pail or this bucket of water back to the inn because it's just so heavy. And I don't know, she's just like a typical kid, horrified. But then this man comes and holds the pail, I keep saying pail, holds the bucket for her, and suddenly she's just not afraid. Which I don't understand, because I know, like, I mean, Hugo did describe the man as having this, like, calm aura, and there's no reason for you to be afraid of him, but it's just like, you're 8 years old and a random stranger just came up to you in the dark. When I was 8, I was horrified of the thought of random strangers coming up to me in the dark. That was the whole reason why I was afraid of the dark when I was a kid. So the insta trust there, little unsettling, but what can you do? It's a book that from the 1860s. Can't really do anything about it. There's a whole chapter about how this man suddenly got away from jail and everyone thinks he's dead and blah blah blah. So to make a long story short, you find out the man is Jean Valjean, and Cosette's no longer afraid. Again, the insta loss of fear. Doesn't make sense to me, but whatever. The next like few chapters just kind of drag a little because it's just Valjean. I mean, at this point you still don't know he's Valjean, but it's pretty obvious. It's Valjean just observing the Thenardiers in their inn and the way Cosette interacts. And he's very upset because Cosette's not allowed to play, and he wants her to. But the Thenardiers are like, no. And I know she had to make up an excuse for losing the money, which is sad. Like, a startling point for me is when Eponine and Azelma left their doll alone. So Cosette went to go get it because she was just desperate, and she's like, oh my god, they're not here, I could grab it, you know? And they just kind of like treated her like shit when they saw her have it. Like, Eponine just started screaming at her, and she's like, Mama, look what she's doing, she's touching my stuff. So then Madame Thenardier started calling Cosette names, and Valjean's just like, what are you doing, why? So then this is where the doll comes in, that big fancy doll that Hugo described. So everyone thinks this man, who is Valjean, is poor just because of the way he's dressed, because he's dressed in like this ugly yellow coat that no one would really be caught dead in. But then he goes out and buys that doll from that very expensive store, and he brings it back for Cosette. And he's like, here, those socks she's sewing, I'll pay her a month's worth. So now she can go play with the doll that, you know, everyone wants. And Eponine and Azelma were just so mad, and I was just like, heh. And, the Thenardier, they started getting suspicious. They're like, alright, who is this man? Who? And then it goes to nighttime where everyone goes to bed, and Valjean sneaks upstairs to Cosette's room, which is a little weird. Just a man sneaking up to a kid's room that he hardly knows. But, and it was sad because I guess a tradition back then was to put your shoes in the chimney for Santa. And Madame Thénardier gave Eponine and Zelma stuff, but she didn't give Cosette anything. Because poor Cosette, this innocent child who's treated like crap, still had hope enough to put her shoe there. And I was just like, oh my god, this is so sad. But then Valjean put money in her shoe, and she got more money than Eponine and Zelma combined, so you go, girl. I also forgot to mention that Madame Thénardier and Thénardier got their own chapter earlier where it described their lives, and Eponine and Zelma aren't their only children. They actually have a son who keeps crying, but Madame Thénardier only cares about her daughters. She doesn't care for boys, so this poor boy is just shoved to the side. And because I've seen the musical, I know who the little boy is, and it does explain why he's very, very independent in the musical. I'm trying to hint who this is without actually saying it, but he is very, very independent, and, 10 years old and going to the barricades. But because he was so neglected as a child, now you see why, and it is shocking to find out that, like, hey, this boy is actually Eponine's brother, because I don't think the musical really addresses that. At least the movie doesn't. They try to, but I don't know if the musical itself addresses that. So, nice to see that. Yeah. Neglecting Cosette and just neglecting her own son. Madame Thénardier is a bitch. Also, later on, like, Valjean essentially buys Cosette off of the Thénardiers. And just buying a child is weird to me. I mean, Thénardier tried pulling strings and making him pay more than he had to, but Valjean's rich, so he was gonna just pay anyway. But then Thénardier's like, I need something from Fantine. You can't just take her. Because, even if you're a blood relative, you can't take her. Because Valjean was pretending to be Cosette's grandpa. But then he took out the letter that Fantine wrote, so he gave Cosette that doll. So, what's she named? Catherine, which is cute. So, she's taking that doll and her new clothes, and then they leave. And Thénardier, like, chases them for a while, which is very stalkerish, because he wanted more money out of Valjean, and he's like, yeah, you stole from me. And then Valjean's just like, bye. And then that book ends, and then we go on to the next book. Hugo also, like, describes the little hut that Cosette and, almost said Javert, that Cosette and Valjean stay in for a while, because they stayed in a room upstairs before running away completely. And to be honest, I skipped through that. I didn't skip it, but I, like, skimmed through it. But yeah, but then they left because Javert came up, and he's like, wow, Valjean might not be dead. And Valjean, like, freaked out. He didn't even know if it was, like, for sure Javert, but he still freaked out anyway and left. And same thing with Javert. He didn't know if it was for sure Valjean, but he's just so adamant about getting the dude that he's just gonna follow anyone who he thinks is Valjean. Very obsessive, but, Javert does this for the law. The law is on top of everything. And by the way, Cosette still doesn't know who Valjean actually is. She only knows him as father. She doesn't know any first name. She doesn't know anything about her past. So if anyone asks her, which the old lady, like the landlady, I guess, did, she would ask her questions. And she's not answering. And it's not to protect Valjean, but it's because she literally doesn't know anything. And I understand why Valjean won't tell her some things, because maybe she'll slip up, because, she's 8-year-olds slip up. But, like, can you just, like, can you imagine, like, not knowing anything about your parents? Like, I knew my parents' first names by the time I was, like, 5. But can you imagine just not knowing anything? And it's still, like, still uncomfortable with the fact that she just trusts this man so much. I mean, like, yeah, sure, he bought you away from the Thénardiers, but it's like, girl, you don't know who this man is. Valjean's a great guy. He's not gonna do anything to her. It's just, can you just imagine something like that happening in real life, though? Because I can't. So Valjean's, like, running away from this apartment because what if it's Javert, even though I don't know? That homeless guy I helped looks like Javert. But he was right, it was Javert. So he's running away, and then Javert and 3 other guys are running after him. And a lot of these chapters are just contemplation on what to do, so I'm just gonna skip all of those. And it finally gets to this wall that he doesn't know how to climb because Cosette's kind of in the way, but he finds rope, ties the rope around her. He climbs the wall first and just pulls her up by the rope. And they jump into this grassland, which is a garden, and guess who's there? Remember Fauchelevent? The guy that hated Valjean, but then was saved by Valjean? There he is, with a bell to his knee. And then the last chapter of that, like, specific book is Javert telling us in his drama queen way, how he was able to get Valjean on his trail, whatever, get on Valjean's trail, and he essentially didn't know it was Valjean in the apartment. He just had suspicions, and his gut instinct was literally just, but what if he is alive? There's nothing to prove it yet, but what if? And yeah, and he pretended to be a homeless guy, because Valjean would help a homeless guy all the time, so Javert pretended to be that guy one day, and both him and Valjean were shocked when they looked at each other, so clearly it worked. So then there's more exposition, and it's just Victor Hugo describing this convent that so happens to be in the garden where Fauchelevent works, and where Valjean jumped into, and this convent is so strict, because, you know, I pictured nuns, I grew up in a Roman Catholic family, so I pictured nuns, I mean, depending on the age, young nuns were like the happy ones, whereas older nuns were the ones that smacked your hand with a ruler every time you did something wrong, even if it was just stuttering. But like in this convent, these nuns can't look at men, which is why Fauchelevent wears the bell. And so when he walks by, they hear him, and it's like, okay, he's a man, look away. And like they just kind of live their life in fear and in poverty and darkness. Like I can't imagine just choosing to live a life like that. And they have a boarding school for girls, and the whole school is just teaching them how to fear men and fear the outside world. And like, when the girls' families comes to visit, they can't touch their family. Like, can you imagine just being away from your loving family for so long? They come to visit, and you're not allowed to hug them. Like, the first thing me and my parents do when I come home from college is hug. I can't imagine doing that. I just can't imagine living in fear. And it's like, what kind of boarding school is this? How are you not closed down? But, you know, I didn't grow up in 1823, which is when this part takes place in, so maybe that was the norm. I don't know. But I can't even imagine, like, just choosing to send a kid to a school like that. And I just can't imagine being a nun, just that strict and living in fear. Like, honestly, one of the funniest things I've heard from a nun, she was checking out a guy, and she's like, well, I can't use the product, but I can still look at him, and I'm just like, wow, I can't believe a nun just said that. But, so clearly this nun, not from this area. So finally, what's his face? Valjean's talking to Fauchelevent. He doesn't recognize who Fauchelevent is until Fauchelevent's like, Monsieur le Maire, because when he was sent to this, garden, he lost all contact with, Valjean's first like town where he was the mayor in, so he has no idea that Monsieur le Maire is basically no more. And he's like, dude, I kind of need to hide you. First of all, I need to know how you got in here, because men aren't allowed in here. And Valjean refuses to tell him, and Valjean's just like, dude, you need to tell your sisters that I am here. And Fauchelevent freaks out. He's like, well, we need to, like, get you out of here so we can get you through the front door. And, like, Valjean was freaking out because he's like, no, nobody can see me, blah, blah, blah. But then Fauchelevent convinces him anyway, because the next day a nun dies. So Fauchelevent goes to, like, the prioress, I think she was called, like, the leader, basically. And he's like, Reverend Mother, can my brother come with his grandchild? And she's like, sure. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stupid conversation before it, but like telling Fauchelevent what he had to do with the nun's coffin and all that. And, so yeah, Valjean's allowed in the convent, and he was happy to hear that. And he found out about the boarding school, so he was like, oh, Cosette can get an education. And it's like, Fauchelevent, are you gonna tell Valjean, like, these girls are taught to be afraid of men and can't touch their families? Like, because I don't think Valjean will like that. He doesn't tell him. They go on with the plan. And the plan, so you're gonna get ready for a lot of stuff that's not in the musical. Like, I'm shocked that Fauchelevent is actually this huge character. Fauchelevent is gonna put Valjean in this dead nun's coffin and sneak that coffin out. Actually, not like sneak it out. He's gonna put him in the coffin and then take the coffin to this burial ground where him and this like drunkard gravedigger are gonna. They're gonna put the coffin in the grave first, and then go out to drink and get the guy drunk before burying the coffin. And while they're out drunk, that's when Valjean was supposed to come out of the coffin. And this is just weird. I would get so scared to be in a coffin for that long. But Valjean's like, you know what? I'm gonna do it. And I'm like, you are crazy. I cannot imagine being in a coffin. No. Like, the thought of being dead in a coffin freaks me out, let alone being alive in one. No thanks. In the meantime, Cosette was gonna go stay with someone. Forgot to mention that she actually almost died. This is when Valjean and Fauchelevent first saw each other. She was so cold she almost died. So that happened. That didn't happen in the musical, but that happens in the book. So this is, people are truly, truly miserable in a book called The Miserable Ones. So the next day, Valjean goes into this coffin. You know, he poked holes so he can breathe. And Fauchelevent puts it in the hearse, blah, blah, blah. But then there's a new gravedigger. Of course. So all the plans go down to shit. Valjean doesn't know there's a new gravedigger though, so he has all the confidence in the world. And poor Fauchelevent is trying to get this gravedigger to go drinking before. And the gravedigger's like, no, work, then drink, peasant. Even though he was a peasant as well, basically. He was rude. I didn't like how he was. He kept calling poor Fauchelevent a peasant. He kind of treated Fauchelevent like shit. Didn't like him. And then it was a whole bunch of dialogue. Then we get to see the dude start burying the coffin, and Valjean got so freaked out that he fainted. Like, the strong man just went unconscious in fear. But Hugo did talk about that. He did say even the strongest of men have their limits, and you know, I agree. Thank you for finally pointing that out. Even the strongest men have limits. Strongest person in general, y'all have limits. And sometimes being buried alive will cause you to reach those limits. But then Fauchelevent sees the gravedigger's card, and you need a card to like get into this area. So I guess it's like an ID of some sort. Steals the card, puts it in his pocket, but then tells the gravedigger like, hey, let's go drinking, but you need your card to come back here. You better go home and check if you have that card. And that basically convinced the gravedigger to leave, and he did leave. But he can't get back in without a card. So Fauchelevent opens up the coffin, and then he thinks Valjean's dead. So much death in this book, but Valjean was just unconscious. He comes back alive. He's like, woo, yay, I'm out, let's go. But first, Fauchelevent goes to the gravedigger's house, and he's like, dude, you actually just dropped your card, so you have to go get it from the dude tomorrow. And I already buried the coffin, so no need to do your job. You know, after that, Valjean and Cosette, they go into the convent, they meet the prioress, and the prioress is like, sure, you could be a gardener, here's your bell. Cosette has to go to school. And that's basically it. Valjean is a gardener besides Fauchelevent. He has a different name for this. I forgot what the name was though. Different name, Cosette goes to school. But of course she gets to hug her family. I don't know what makes her so special. Maybe because her grandfather is the gardener, so that's probably her special treatment. But still, I mean, she can't, like, live with him. She has to live in the dormitory, so there's that. But, yeah, she gets to hug him. Oh, I just want to know where this dead nun's body was. I don't think they ever actually said what happened to her body. Like, where they put it. So they were just, essentially, they could have just been holding, like, a empty coffin and no one would know. So where is this body? But yeah, that's about it, because then Volume 2 ends with Valjean was living peacefully in hiding and Cosette was growing up. And then Volume 3, Marius, begins, which I didn't read yet. So yeah, this is more of a summary. I don't really have too much discussion to go on. And I can't really compare it to the musical because so much of this section didn't happen in the musical. Cosette didn't really sing Castle on the Cloud in this book. There really was no mess or the house moments. Fauchelevent had a huge role though, so I was genuinely surprised with that. And I actually like to see bigger roles from these tiny characters. Because I know in the musicals, they mention their names like once, but then they're not important. So it's like, why would you mention your name then? You know, because like Fauchelevent does say his name in the movie. Also, I like to say I think Fauchelevent is kind of smart. Because he was kind of portrayed as dumb. And just not smart at all. But he was able to convince the gravedigger to go away, which took forever. But he did it. Also, another thing I find interesting is that, I mean, maybe he did, but, like, he essentially, like, Valjean in the musical goes to Fauchelevent, he's like, we need to disappear. But he doesn't really do that in the book. I mean, yeah, he needs to be in hiding, and, like, he changes his name, but, like, he's still out and about. Like, and in the musical, the nuns wouldn't be able to know who he was. But in the book, they do. So he's just hiding from the outside world. The inside world, not so much. Whereas in the musical, him and Cosette are just secluded with each other. Or maybe I should just say the movie. I don't know about the stage musical. But at least in the movie, they're like just secluded to each other. Nobody can see them. So I find that very, very interesting. Also, reading the Fauchelevent meeting Monsieur Le Maire, that part, this song was stuck in my head for hours because I was singing it while reading it. So I had this stuck in my head for hours. Also, for a while, this part of Castle on a Cloud is stuck in my head. Was stuck in my head. Actually, it is. It always gets stuck in my head. But I love it so much, and it, like, breaks my heart.
Crying at all is not allowed, not in my castle on a cloud.
But yeah, that's all I have for you guys tonight. It was a very short volume. A lot of exposition that I admittedly skimmed through. But I enjoyed talking with you. Hopefully I could finish up volume 3 quickly. I did not start it yet, but I will film that discussion as soon as I do. I'm warning you now, it will be a while because it's about 200 pages long. But this is when we finally meet the students. I'm going to assume so since it's called Marius, so I'm very, very excited for that. We're moving along. Before you know it, we're going to be singing one day more. So, hope you enjoyed this summary. I'm trying to make good discussions, but all this is coming out as a summary. So maybe that's what I'm going to call these, summary and like compare and contrast. So I hope you enjoyed this summary. I hope you enjoyed this comparing and contrasting to the musical itself. And like these songs I am inserting in this video. And if you like it, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and I'll see you guys later. Ciao a tutti!
There is a lady all in white, holds me and sings a lullaby. She's nice to see and she's soft to touch. She says, Cosette.